Chris Doucher for GeekNerdNet.com. I am at the 2023 Calgary Expo. Super excited to be sitting beside Bill Morrison. Hey there, Bill.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Hi, Chris.
Hey, so we met yesterday for the first time on day 2 of the show, and I was very lucky and happy to be moderating a panel of yours, talking about your career. And I thought, why not move that into a bit of audio and put it on my site and let some other people share who couldn't be here. So thanks again for taking time.
We call that double dipping.
Yes, that's perfect. and day 3 starts off with a bang. I love it. Okay. Nice. More of that. I love it. Okay. So, Bill, obviously, we talked yesterday, Simpsons Comics, Bongo Comics, Matt Groening, your relationship there, to Mad Magazine. Before that, you're the Detroit kid getting started, made your way to the West Coast. I'm really paraphrasing for time here, but I want to start something I didn't know, actually, when we were talking in your panel yesterday. What I didn't realize, so you said it, was, so I want to kind of start at the end. You were editor-in-chief for Mad Magazine, but you're only the 5th in its history.
That's right.
Which is, given the breadth of time that magazine's been around, that's an incredible, really, achievement. So talk a bit about that, how that came about.
You mean how I became the editor-in-chief?
Yeah.
Well, basically, Mad was, doing just fine in New York. And DC, or more importantly, Warner Brothers, decided that they wanted DC Comics to move out to Burbank. And Warner Brothers is the parent company of DC. So everybody at DC Comics was forced to, they kind of did it incrementally, but eventually they, finally got everybody out to California, set up in brand new offices. But the Mad guys, who are also part of DC Comics, said, no, we're not going. We're staying here in New York because we are a New York magazine. And, frankly, everybody who was on staff there, they have family in New York. Some of them have grandkids. So they don't want to move across the country and be apart from their families and everything they've, known and loved for their whole lives. So they just refused. And so there was some headbutting, and then finally DC said, look, we'll let you stay in New York for the time being, but we're going to have to look for somebody in California to take over. And we're going to have to hire a new staff out there. So I guess that search went on. It wasn't like an overt search. They didn't put an ad in the newspaper or anything like that, but they were quietly looking. And I contacted Dan DiDio, who was the one of the co-publishers of DC Comics at the time, looking for work because my job, although it was still full-time, I was working on Disenchantment, the Matt Groening Netflix show. And Matt was paying my salary. But when Netflix took over and became the producers of the show, they were suddenly in the position of paying everybody's salaries, including mine, and I had to take a 30% pay cut, and that wasn't sustainable for me with my mortgage and car payments, etc. So I, started looking for other work, either freelance or something permanent that could match or at least come close to the salary I was getting, so I could keep paying all my bills. So I contacted Dan at DC, and he asked me to meet him for lunch. And I didn't know what he wanted to talk to me about, but it turns out when he found out I was available, he realized that I would be a good person to fill that slot. So that's how I became number 5.
Number 5. Okay, so when you're having that lunch, and I remember yesterday you were saying you're trying to keep your poker face. Internally, you know the ask is coming from Dan, and then the ask comes, and then the almost like the what's the best way to put it? Maybe I'm putting it the wrong way, but almost the weight of something so cool and great in terms of career and the history of Mad, and then to be only the 5th EIC, editor-in-chief. Like, when did that hit you? Was it right away at lunch, or was it after, or was it a culmination of time?
I don't think I really had realized that I was only the 5th editor at the time. It wasn't until I was in the job and I was, focusing on a lot of the history of Mad that it occurred to me. I started thinking about the Harvey Kurtzman days and the Al Feldstein days and Nick Meglin and John Ficarra, and then that's it. Those 4 guys were the editors from 1952 up to when they hired me in 2017.
Amazing.
And so that's when I realized I was only the 5th to hold that position.
Yeah. And then I love that. Thanks for sharing that story again with me. But so just before, a bit before that, you're with Matt Groening, and the Simpsons had just been kind of getting started at the time in the early 90s, and correct me if I'm wrong. If I mess this up, I apologize in advance.
That's okay, I'll correct you.
Okay, good. So you get your start, and you're doing some art direction on all the production, the merchandise stuff, right?
Yes, I was initially brought into the Simpsons empire to draw the characters for merchandise, basically. So I did illustrations for T-shirts, party napkins, video game boxes. Nice. Bed sheets, like everything you can imagine that had The Simpsons on it.
I'm pretty sure I had a pair of Eat My shorts. I know I did.
Okay, well, I may have done that drawing.
Nice. So you get started in that. You're in that world of Fox and The Simpsons, and then down the road, Futurama's coming around. And then talk a bit how you got into Futurama and just your path into the actual show.
Well, Futurama came along after we had already started Bongo.
Sorry, I didn't mean to skip that.
That's okay. We started Bongo Comics. A lot of people don't realize Bongo sort of gets lumped into the category of licensed comics because it's a comic book version of a television show.
Right.
And traditionally, there's an animated series, and then the parent company that owns the property will license the characters to a comic book company to do a comic book version. And usually it's either watered down or they change things. It's never quite authentic.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say never. Sometimes it is, but it's rarely authentic.
Yeah.
And I remember being a kid, and I would pick up a Roadrunner comic, for example. And Roadrunner and Coyote are talking, and I was like, that doesn't seem like a cartoon. What's going on?
Why are they talking?
But, to do a comic, they couldn't do a silent comic,
right.
For 20, 30, 40, 50 issues.
Yeah.
So they made the decision, we'll make them talk because that's the only way we can sustain this. But it never felt right to me.
Yeah.
But because Matt Groening retained all the publishing rights when he sold The Simpsons to Fox, and that was the deal. When he first pitched it, the deal was they would own it.
Yeah.
But, he would be attached as a producer, executive producer, et cetera, et cetera. So he makes money off of every aspect of The Simpsons, and he has some control, but not total control. With publishing, he retained total control.
Wow.
So he was able to do his own Simpsons books, his own Simpsons magazines, calendars, and we did a magazine called Simpsons Illustrated, which had a comic section. So those were the first Simpsons comics, but within a magazine.
Yeah.
We did that for about 2 years. We had an annual at the end of each year. So the first annual was a 3D issue. And so for the second annual, we wanted to do another kind of gimmicky thing that would make it special, not just a regular issue. And somebody, either Matt or Steve Vance, who was the editor, came up with the idea of, let's just make it a comic book. Let's just do all comics. Because by then we were doing we'd gone from about 1 page of comics in the magazine to I think about 8 or 10. So it made sense to just do a comic book. Because, that's what we were having the most fun with anyway.
Yeah.
And they decided to make it comic book size and actually even retitle it. So it was almost like it was The Simpsons Illustrated in disguise, because it was called Simpsons Comics and Stories. But it was a publication of the Simpsons Illustrated magazine. So that came out. It was hugely successful, and that's what gave Matt the confidence that there was an appetite for Simpsons comics. So we started Bongo. I was on board at the very beginning as art director and also writer and artist. And after the first year, Steve Vance, the editor, left, and I became the editor. So I'd been doing that for a few years, and Matt came into my office one day and he said, I'm working on a new TV show, and I was wondering if you could help me visualize the characters. So he would give me like a couple of sentences about a character. I would go off and just do drawings of what I thought that character might look like in his style. And I would give those drawings to him. He would review them. If he found, something he liked, it was never like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Right.
It was always like, this isn't really quite right, but I like the hair, or I like, the costume.
Yeah.
So then he would do a drawing, and then he would throw it back to me, and he'd say, try something like this.
Yeah.
And so we would have a little back and forth, and then, would arrive at the final designs. And that was all happening in order to develop a pitch so that he could go into Fox and say, here's my follow-up show to The Simpsons. So that happened. We developed, produced, developed all the characters, produced background designs, drawings for props like ray guns and spaceships and things like that.
Cool.
And then he sold the show to Fox. They put him up in a building with production offices, so all the writers and the casting directors and everybody were set up in this Fox building. And he said, I want to have Bongo there so that I don't have to drive across town whenever I have to meet with the Bongo people. So they had room for us, and they put us up in some offices on the same floor as Futurama. And at this point, I didn't really have any official involvement in the show. I was just back doing my Bongo stuff, and but the producers who knew what I had done in helping to develop the show would come down for artwork occasionally, and they'd say, this design isn't working, can you take a crack at it? Or the guys at Rough Draft, which was the animation studio that did the animation for the show, they're really swamped, and we need this character design, or we need like 3 pages full of spaceships, can you draw something up? So that got to be an everyday thing.
Yeah.
And it got to be more and more until the point where it was a full-time job.
Yeah.
So I was doing really 2 jobs, but only getting paid for one.
Yeah.
And so I went to one of the producers and I said, don't get me wrong, I love working on the show, but I really think I should be working on the show. And they said, yes, you're totally right, we agree. We'll give you a title and we'll give you a salary. And so that's how I became the art director for the show.
Nice. I love that. I mean, it only makes sense, right? It's like, sure, I'm in the building, but, can you guys maybe pay me for doing 2 jobs?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
As fun as it is.
Yeah.
Well,
they were just trying to get the pilot done. I mean,
Yeah.
we're still working on the pilot.
Yeah.
So they just weren't thinking, they were just thinking, oh, Bill can do this. Nobody was thinking about titles and salaries and stuff.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned, and I'm going to go really far back now to almost the start of your career, on illustrating art on the art side and stuff. But in the panel you mentioned, and I didn't get a chance to ask you because it wasn't kind of the right time, so I'll ask here. And if it's a weird question, just tell me to screw off. But at the time of car manuals, you're working on, you're drawing car manuals, like you're in Detroit, and I mean that's a bread and butter, like a town for auto and everything,
right.
and awesome that you got a gig there starting out. But in the terms of drawing those manuals, drawing what it looks like to do an oil change or any other number of technical car-related, automobile-related items that you drew, did that kind of more technical drawing ever factor in later in your career of, man, I'm so glad I have the foundation of this from early on to be able to draw from it later?
Actually, yes, because I'm always told that my line is super clean, even when I'm inking with a brush, or just doing any kind of illustration. And I think I developed that when I was doing the technical art, because everything had to be very precise. and the lines had to be perfect. And I remember when I was doing the Disney posters, sometimes these movie posters would be blown up into billboards, so the artwork had to hold up at a really enlarged size. So I was doing the outlines in brush with gouache, but they were like really crisp and perfect, so that when the image was blown up, it would look good. And I think I always kind of harken back to the technical illustration days as the reason for that, because I think it helped me develop that precision.
That's very cool. Bill Morrison, thank you so much for taking time.
My pleasure.
And
Thanks,
you're welcome. And thank you. Let people know where they can find you on Instagram. I think it's Atomic Battery, right?
At Atomic Battery, which is a reference to the Batman TV show.
Awesome.
The atomic battery is what powered the Batmobile.
I love it.
And that show changed my life. It's what made me want to get into comics. So my studio name is Atomic Battery Studios. You can find me on Facebook at Bill Morrison Atomic Battery Studios, or Instagram at Atomic Battery.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
I guess they could.